first thing you'll see when you boot up Akka Arrh is an epilepsy warning, and I've perhaps never played a game in my life that it's more appropriate for. The experience of playing Akka Arrh is most comparable, I imagine, to the experience of taking any of a number of illicit drugs and having a kaleidoscope challenge you to a duel. And though you may look at the footage in this video and think a game that looks like a fireworks display made out of neon signs would be near impossible to comprehend, never mind play, those who don't mind some wild psychedelic overstimulation and a stiff challenge are gonna want to give this one a look. Gameplay footage of Akka Arrh is far from self-explanatory, and describing what exactly it is will require a little bit of history. This game is actually an identically named remake of an extremely rare trackball-only Atari prototype that was never released aside from 3 arcade cabinets produced for testing, apparently because players found it too difficult. The remake is designed by industry veteran Jeff Minter, who made classics like Centipede and Tempest 2000, as well as more recent arcade titles like Polybius from 2016. The actual gameplay of Akka Arrh is similar to a wave shooter with some twists. First of all, no matter how much it looks the part, this is not a bullet hell game. You play as a stationary turret with no ability to dodge anything, and in a sense, it works like a tower defense where you are the tower. Each level spawns you in an arena with 2 weapons, bombs and bullets, both to be used sparingly. Bombs are designed to be carefully placed in the path of enemies such that their slow, rippling after effects will set off lengthy chain reactions that kill enemies and refill bullets as they do. Setting off another bomb resets your chain combo back to 0, and thus high score chasers will want to be very careful about where they place each one and when they'll set off the next. Each level often has its own rules about the shape of a bomb's area of effect, and sections of the arena it will either be isolated from or mirrored in. A confusing concept in theory, but one that makes a lot of sense as you begin to play. Bullets don't reset your combo chain, so are the ideal method of attack for enemies either unaffected by bombs or unreached by them. But again, these are limited, and if you run out, only strategic placement of another bomb is going to get you more. The interplay between these 2 weapons requires a careful balancing act and requires you to use both strategically without ever relying on one exclusively. I mentioned there's a tower defense spin here, and that comes in the form of life force. 16 rings that live on an arena below the main play area. If any enemies reach your turret and travel down to the arena, alarm bells will blare and you'll have to rush down to take them out before they can siphon your life force from you, then rush back up before it happens again. Some enemy projectile hits can drain your life force rings too, and while you won't actually die until you lose all 16, you'll want to lose as few as possible, because while you gain some back based on the number of bullets stockpiled at the end of a level, you don't reset to 16 just by starting a new stage. The game is divided into 2 separate modes of play. Pure mode is an insanely difficult mode designed for absolute masochists and requires blasting through all 50 levels without losing your life rings. A vast majority of players will settle on the restart best mode instead, which lets you restart play from the most recent level you were able to reach. But the design of this mode is interesting. While this will sound like a strange comparison, its progression most reminds me of my favorite indie game of 2022, Sifu, where you can only continue a level from your best attempt at it, meaning the attempt where most life rings remain. So for example, if you're starting level 15 with only 5 out of 16 life force rings left, you're welcome to play from there for the sake of practice, but meaningful progress is only likely to happen if you revisit earlier levels and do better in them to be able to start level 15 in better shape. While I'm a fan of design that pushes your skills to earn progress, getting stuck on a particularly difficult level can feel a bit defeating. Thankfully, playing Akka Arrh is mostly a great time, and surviving earlier levels with a better outcome always felt fabulously rewarding. The game allows you to pick from a variety of control templates for both controller and mouse, but frankly, playing with a controller was much more difficult and didn't allow me to be as reactive when enemies were coming for my turret from all directions. I settled on the mouse-only mode that used bombs with the left click, bullets with the right click, and went downstairs to the life force arena with a mouse wheel click, and the results felt tight, responsive, and all the right sorts of frantic. The 50 levels of Akka Arrh also managed to pack in a good variety of enemies, and oftentimes getting from the beginning to end of a level no worse for wear required strategy as much as reactivity. For example, some enemies might release deadly, difficult-to-track projectiles when hit with bullets, but may die instantly when hit with a bomb. So while the game does require some quick reflexes and the ability to draw your attention to different parts of the screen at a moment's notice, it also rewards careful observation of enemy attack patterns and weaknesses, which when exploited correctly can make things substantially easier. While this sort of design usually prevented Akka Arrh from feeling tedious, it does tend to get extremely unforgiving at times. As you can plainly see, there's a lot going on at once, and while tracking it all is easier than it looks, some projectiles flung from off-screen required seemingly superhuman reaction time. Additionally, if an enemy manages to breach your turret and make it to your life force arena, your misfortune tends to compound. Going downstairs to take care of that enemy means more enemies can rush your turret unabated from upstairs. The result is several times where a level would go completely awry because every time I rush downstairs, another enemy breached my turret from upstairs and end up going down and up frequently enough to make my head spin and usually lose a lot of life in the process. This wasn't too frequent an issue, and I don't suspect it'll turn off the get good crowd much at all, but still worth pointing out. I should mention that power-ups appear periodically to help you out, but oftentimes when I picked them up, I had no idea what they did and was just happy to have a bit of help. I also find the lack of a restart level button from the pause menu really baffling, as there were many times where a level wasn't going as planned and I would rather just replay it at the touch of a button rather than navigating back to the main menu and trying again. Visually speaking, I don't think much more is to be said of Akka Arrh than what you see before you, but in case a hole has already been burned through your retinas watching this video, here's the gist. Akka Arrh looks insane. Its arenas and enemies dance and flash like a seizing strobe light at the end of a rainbow, and for whatever reason have words of encouragement flashing across the screen like, "You really are the best," and "You're the best in the world," like your friend that got way too drunk and sentimental at a frat party that one time. And while I personally was a fan of the look, it won't be for everybody. If the footage you've seen so far has you on the fence about whether you're able to handle it, here's a bit of gameplay with the accessibility option for subdued colors turned on. I personally preferred playing with the normal colors because of the cool vibe it gave the arenas, but hopefully seeing the accessibility option in action gives some of you a better sense of if the game is for you or not. Sound-wise, Akka Arrh is strange. While the game's trailer showed off some fast-paced dubsteppy beats to go along with the trippy visuals, most music I encountered in game was anything but that. In fact, it was more meditative than anything else, with slow melodies often punctuated by what sounded like sitar strings or occasional piano keys to go with the gameplay. It sets a trippy tone that often gets interrupted by shouts of "Okay," "Brilliant," or "Bingo" in typical arcadey fashion, which sometimes made me wonder what vibe the developer was actually going for. It's far from bad, but continues to make me question how much this game is intended for sober people. For those it matters to, Akka Arrh is currently not playable on the Steam Deck. The game launches fine, but for whatever reason many of the assets render in blank white, making much of what's going on impossible to see. Hopefully the developers will fix the issues and make it compatible, but if you're buying to play on Steam Deck, I would wait for word of the issues being resolved before pulling the trigger. If what you've seen and heard piques your interest in the slightest and you're up for a serious challenge, and I do mean serious challenge, I recommend giving Akka Arrh a look. Its crazy visuals and extreme difficulty cater to a niche audience, but it's a good time if you're looking for something trippy and psychedelic that has enough strategy and charm to avoid feeling repetitive or mindless. Just make sure you're ready to be more than a bit overstimulated in the process.